Just give it a moment for everyone to jump on the stream here. I adjust the angle. Okay. So just give it 30 seconds for everyone to jump in and we'll get started. Just let me know if you can hear me okay. Just drop a 1 in the chat. Because today we're going to be talking about some banking trouble. Yes, indeed. Okay, good. Thanks for letting me know. You can hear me okay. So firstly, good evening then from London. Yes, I've arrived back into London now, and I'll be back on the island very shortly so we can get the walk and talk done from this week. But today we are going to be talking about what's just been announced actually with the banks. There's a lot of issues at the moment with the banks, both the regional banks in the US and in China. So a lot of problems. And by the way, because I keep forgetting to mention, the Australians who have messaged about the whole Black Friday, Cyber Monday thing, I understand that you're a day ahead now, so apologies for that. So I've sorted all that out with the coupons. So yes, you can get the course. I've sorted it all out now. So just for everyone that's been emailing, there's like over 100 emails about that. It's all sorted now, so you can do that. I didn't realize that it's already expired each day in Australia and New Zealand. So that's fine. So I'm extending the Black Friday, Cyber Monday thing by 1 more day, just so that you can all get that. So apologies for that, and hopefully you can all get that, because it is so we'll just say the last 24 hours now, and everybody can get that deal. All right, so here we go then. Let's get started with the regional banks and all of the issues then. Okay. There's basically a kind of takeover attempt happening at the moment with the larger banks and the regional banks. And it's pretty crazy. I've been going through a good couple of hours worth of all the documentation on it and what they're doing. And they're basically taking them over. They're being taken over by rivals. And to me, it's questionable as to whether the Fed and the FDIC and some of the other programs have done this deliberately, or so that they can have these larger banks, or whether this is just a coincidence. But regional banks with assets, so that is all the funds, all the bonds and everything else, so commercial loans, etc. So these banks with assets between 80 and 120 billion dollars are now in such dire straits due to everything we've talked about before, the higher interest rates putting pressure on their bond prices and everything else, that they are looking to be taken over by some of the biggest banks in the US. So this is the ones we've talked about before. If you remember that walk and talk where I forecast the ones that would collapse, and actually 2 of them did collapse. But we've also talked about Zions, First Horizon, Comerica. So these are 3 more, which I think are going to be taken over as acquisitions very shortly. So if you have any funds in there, you should be okay. But if you are investors in there, just remember what happened to some of those other banks that were taken over, where it was a kind of hostile takeover. The shareholders were hit really badly. In fact, they were wiped out. So just be aware of that. If you have shares in Comerica, Zions, First Horizon, these are 3 of the ones I think could have a hostile takeover very shortly. And again, I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying it's possible. Now, there's a lot more banks. There's actually hundreds of them, regional banks, but these are just the 3 that I've spotted right away. But there could be a lot more banks. So if you own shares in them, it's different to you owning deposits in them. So another thing I noticed was shares of regional banks have seen a 21% drop this year compared to some of the larger banks that haven't seen that sort of level. So what's caused this then? Well, US regulators have unveiled a whole host of new rules, and these specifically target regional banks. And there's even more regulations that are going to be coming in the future as well. So under these new regulations, banks with assets exceeding 100 billion are required to maintain long-term debt that surpasses either 6% of their risk-weighted assets or 3.5% of their total average assets. It's depending on which is greater of these two. Now, this is a significant increase. And if you remember back in 2020, 2021, I said this is an absolute storm waiting to happen when they said, banks, just drop your reserve ratio down to 0%. You don't need to hold anything, just go for it, right? And now we're starting to see all of this turnaround where banks are being told they've got to hold X percentage again. And what we're seeing is these smaller and regional banks, they just don't have that, because it's not that they've mismanaged their funds or shareholder funds and depositors' funds. It's that they did pretty much what I think most people would have done in that situation. They used those funds to buy bonds, so they've got long-term security. But what they didn't account for, or at least I guess they didn't account for, maybe they did, but they probably didn't expect interest rates to go so high and bond valuations to drop so low, taking them underwater. And that's why I said, if there was ever a run on the banks and everyone just ran to get cash out, a lot of the banks would just collapse because they are underwater. It's a bit like when we talked about Evergrande and they had assets of X, but they had liabilities of Y. Well, it doesn't matter what anyone tells me. Oh, they're a great company, they're wonderful, they've got a bright future, everything else. It doesn't matter if their assets are lower than their liabilities. The company is bankrupt. And it's funny that we're just mentioning Evergrande there, because we're going to talk about another Chinese bank that is absolutely, it's still new what's coming out about this bank. The shadow bank, which is what we've talked about before. The shadow banks are the biggest problem. They caused the 2008 crisis. And now we're being told that there's a shadow bank in China, absolutely huge, over $1 trillion yuan, which there's a massive criminal investigation. Billions have gone missing from this bank. And it could go on to lead to a knock-on effect for other banks, and it could even spread. So there's a big problem here. So these regional US banks then, the new regulations include a mandate for banks to submit detailed resolution plans known as living wills. These plans are crucial for enabling regulators to effectively wind down the financial institution if it's at risk of failing, thereby protecting the broader financial system. What is the reason for this? What is the logic? It's because at the same time as they're increasing these debt levels, they know a lot of these banks don't have the funds. That they know what's happened, and that's why they've provided these credit lines and things for the banks. The other issue is the FDIC and some of the other programs. We know because we've covered it, and we did not an investigation, but we looked into it, and I did a video on a walk and talk about it. The FDIC hasn't got any funds left. It got wiped out in March with one of the biggest bank failures ever in history. So they were all what they called the crypto bank failures. So they haven't got the funds, and they've tried to get the big banks to pay into it, which they have been paying into it, but very slowly. They haven't got the funds. So I think that is one of the reasons why there's some issues around this. So what are they asking for then? For optimal profitability, they want banks to eventually organize into 3 distinct size groups. Those above 120 billion in assets, those between 50 billion and 80 billion, and those between 20 and 50 billion dollars. It doesn't really say why they want the banks to do this. It just says this is what they want them to organize into these groups. Again, I think this is a consolidation attempt. I really do. Why exactly? I'm not 100% sure, but I would assume it's something to do with the CBDC, the central bank digital currency. I think it's also to do with the FDIC and some of the problems with the FDIC and the investigation. There's actually investigations going on right now into the FDIC for all sorts of weird stuff, and I think the director's been fired. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, believe me. Regional banks are also seeing now permanently higher funding costs. So this, after all this happened in March, remember we did all the charts and we looked at where this was going. All of this that they're trying to say is it's not a problem anymore, everything's fine, is a big lie. It's now a bigger threat than ever, these banks. The liquidity ratio is so bad right now. They're underwater. Their hold to maturity portfolios, as they're known, are massively, there's massive problems on these. It's one that we've got some of the biggest issues right now since 2008, even before 2008, the dot-com bubble. It's so crazy what's happening with these banks. And then even if you look at the large banks, what are they doing right now? This, again, crucial information. 64 US bank branches filed to shut down in one single week. Okay, this isn't in a month or something like that. It's 64 branches in 1 week. So who are these? They're the big ones. PNC, JP Morgan Chase. These are just an example of two. PNC Bank is closing 19 branches. They're set to close 19 across Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Texas. JP Morgan is about to close 18 across various states as well. And they're saying it's because of reduced profitability and efficiency in staffing. In other words, what they're saying is they want to make a lot more profit by cutting off our access to bank branches. And they want to fire people because they know they can replace them now with AI. AI is actually developing so fast. And it's not just the AI, it's the robotics as well. I was watching, I was reading a report today about robotics. Maybe I'll do a video on that because it was super interesting about 2025 when all these humanoid robots are coming online. I did not know we were that far ahead, but apparently because of how it scales, even though we're quite a way off right now, it's supposed to 10x next year and 10x the year after. That to me is mind-boggling. If you're in robotics, then you probably understand it a lot better than me. But just crazy. All the stuff that's going on in the world, to me, is... And as I said, I'm in London today, and I was on the train and the tube and stuff today and walking around and recording the annual walk-around video, actually. And it was so strange to be walking around. Everything feels very different year to year to year. Everything feels really, really different. London feels more alien every time I go there, actually. PNC Bank, getting back, is going to shut down 147 locations, and it's going to move 60% of its business online. They're going to be using AI admin staff. What they're saying is that, they're saying lots of things, but the AI admin staff are much more efficient. They don't need bathroom breaks. They're not rude. They don't, actually some of the stuff I can't say, but there's all sorts of other things they're saying that it will replace issues in the workplace with staff and stuff like that. Some of the stuff that has been leaked, this is leaked information, by the way, is wild, absolutely wild. By the way, if you're just joining the stream, welcome. Here we're talking about bank failures. And also for the Australians, if you're watching, you're probably watching a replay actually, just to let you know, I've extended the Black Friday to Cyber Monday coupon by 24 hours. Apologies for that situation with you being a day ahead. So that's all sorted. So you've still got time to get the deal. So the bank bailouts is absolutely surging right now. Absolutely surging the program. So there's something called the BTFP. So this is the Federal Reserve's Bank Term Funding Program. And it was only supposed to be a sort of stopgap, short-term borrowing. And already it's surging week on week. As of November 22, here we go. 114 billion now in outstanding loans with these banks. This is a short-term funding, by the way. It's not designed to be, a long-term funding program here, and the banks are just not paying it back yet. Indeed. Just looking at the chat quickly there. So if the banks, because I read the statements and it says they are all sound and resilient. Oh, they're solid, they're great. If the banks are so sound and resilient, then why are they all taking these bailouts? Why are they all getting this money? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. They've even borrowed. Okay, so that was the 114 billion was from the BTFP, but they've also borrowed over 300 billion from the Fed discount window. So this is staggering, absolutely staggering. Now, to put it into context for any economics geeks like me watching, the 114 billion or the 300 billion is, let's say, it's half a trillion. That's small compared to the amount of bank assets in general. There's 22 trillion or something like that. So it is small in comparison. However, it's the regional banks that have taken most of these funds. It's not the big banks. So when you put it into perspective and you look at how Pareto's law works with the 80-20 principle, it's actually a huge percentage of the regional banks that have taken this funding program, all of these loans, which they've put up security as a way. I think that's the best way to describe it. They've put up a lot of security in their assets against these loans, and some of the funds were created into existence. So can you see why I'm a bit skeptical and suspicious here? Well, if they default, these assets, which are real assets, commercial real estate, bond portfolios, things like that. Well, I guess someone's going to be pedantic here and say the bond portfolio isn't a real asset. Well, okay, it's not a tangible asset, it's intangible. But the commercial real estate, let's just stick with that for argument's sake. The commercial real estate is tangible. Well, if these banks all default, then those real assets are going to get accumulated. And that's what I'm seeing that I find a little bit strange with all of this. Now, just to finish up then, we've got to talk about this Zhongji default. China's launched a massive investigation into the shadow bank because they've in effect declared insolvency without declaring insolvency. This is China's largest shadow bank. If you don't understand about shadow bank, we talked about this on numerous videos before, but it's a way that a financial institution can avoid a lot of the regulations by making loans and all these other things as a shadow bank. So they're not an official big bank. Well, these are the things that caused a lot of the problems in the 2008 crisis when these shadow banks failed. And this is pretty concerning because they've got $500 billion in assets. And a lot of this money has sort of gone missing. It's $36.4 billion worth has gone missing. And the shadow banking sector is only worth 2.9 trillion. So you see, they're a third of the entire sector. And this is why it's so bad, because of the losses that have been accumulated here. And this is just the ones we know about. There's a lot more that we don't know about. Now, they also think there could be another 56 billion in losses. And they say that if this is the case and they have to have a fire sale in order to recover and they have to do the criminal investigation, it means that the assets will typically sell at around 70% in China. So they think that even more could lose money. So you can see where all of this is going. There's a big issue here in China. This could easily be bigger than the Evergrande issue. No problem at all. Because we know that's still ongoing, Chinese real estate. And China's actually making some of the big banks give lifelines to the real estate developers in China. So they're just kicking the can down the road. I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep doing this, but they are just kicking this can down the road in China. But it hasn't gone away. People always talk about how this has gone away and there isn't a big problem anymore with it. There is. It still exists. And now we're seeing a lot of issues in the regional banks in the US as well. All right, well, just a short video for you today. I hope that was helpful. Take care. God bless you guys. And I will see you tomorrow. Fingers crossed, flights dependent.